Business meeting, Tuesday, February 18th through 2020, Levy Court Chamber Room 203 at 7 p.m. sharp. Invocation by Mr. Howe. Pledge allegiance to our flag. Mr. Angel. Moment of silence for our troops and first responders. Mr. Sweeney. All rise.
Heavenly Father, we recognize your presence tonight and ask your blessing on all of our proceedings. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Please remain standing for a moment of silence for our first responders who too often rush into the flame when we're running away from it, for our law enforcement who do the same, and for those military members who have given their all. Over the past 2 weeks since we were back in session, we've lost police officer Nick O'Rear from the Kimberly Police Department in Alabama. These are all deaths on duty. Trooper Joseph Bullitt from the Florida Highway Patrol, Deputy Sheriff Donna Richardson Below from DeSoto Parish Sheriff's Office in Louisiana, Lieutenant Shirley Lanning, the Canadian County Sheriff's Office in Oklahoma, Officer David Kellywood, White Mountain Apache Tribal Police Department in Arizona, the K-9 Hondo, who took a bullet for an officer in Harriman City Police Department in Utah, Sergeant Javier Gutierrez, a pilot who was killed during an insider attack in the Nangarhar province. Sergeant Antonio Ray Rodriguez, a pilot, also killed in that inside attack in the Nangarhar province in Afghanistan. Army Specialist Tyne Kimball from Central Port, Oregon, and Fire Chief Manuel Galindo, who was killed in an apparatus accident on his way to a fire. Please keep their families, their friends, their co-officers, their law enforcement co-workers in your thoughts and prayers tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. A roll call. Ms. Tanaka.
Mr. Angel?
Present.
Mr. Buxton? Absent. Mr. Hall?
Present.
Mr. Howell?
Here.
Mr. Pepper?
Here.
Mr. Sweeney?
Here.
Mr. Banta?
Present.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 present, 1 absent.
Thank you, Roy. 6 commissioners present. We do have a quorum. Before we adopt the agenda, there are 2 minor changes. One, the employee for the month of March 2020 is not available for this evening, so we'll do that next month, and also we'll do April's employee of the month at the same time. And secondly, we're going to reverse the order of Mr. Angel and Mr. Howe. So Mr. Angel will be first under administration, and then Public Works, Mr. Howe, will come after that. So those 2 items will be changed on the agenda at this time.
Move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Ready to move and seconded, Mr. Sweeney and Mr. Angel, to approve the amended agenda. Any questions on that motion? Seeing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton? Absent. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes. Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Roy. 6 commissioners approves the amended agenda. Need a motion on the minutes of Tuesday, January 28th and February the 4th.
So moved.
Second.
Regular move and seconded. Mr. Angel, Mr. Sweeney to approve the agenda minutes of Tuesday, January 28th and February the 4th. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton, absent. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the minutes of Tuesday, January 28th and February the 4th, 2020. We will now recess into committee meetings. Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Quayla, please. Mr. Quayla, can you turn your mic on, please?
In your packets was a proposed revision to policy P215. I was requested by commissioners to add some language that would incorporate the county administrator into the approval process and to develop a procedure for which additional certifications could qualify for a P215. And these revisions that you see presented, I believe, would accomplish those 2 goals per the commissioner's request. Back to you, Mr. Angel.
Thank you. Gentlemen, any questions, concerns? None? Oh, wow. Mr. Hall?
Was there anyone here from the employee council or from the employees that wanted to speak to this tonight, or are we getting to that?
I believe the president for city council, Levy Court Council is here. Chris, did you want to say something, sir?
Thank you, guys. Commissioners, good evening. The updates to policy 215 came to our attention a couple weeks ago. It was on your agenda tonight, and we're concerned about some of the language. Most of the language is existing, but when we have a chance to potentially amend something, as we found out is coming to you tonight, we wanted to make sure that we could clear up any inconsistencies or unclear language. There's a little bit of unclear language in terms of who has the authority over different parts of this. There's different pieces as an employee goes about applying, and that's in section A, and it talks about it, the department head and the personnel director or the county administrator. So it adds Mike Petitmage as the county administrator to that existing language now. Then further down under section H, talks about any non-retroactive pay increase. Non-retroactive is also added language, shall be effective upon approval of the personnel director. It doesn't say anything about Mike or the county administrator there or the department head. I think the intent here was to add the county administrator as sort of the oversight of embarking on this for an individual employee seeking a higher degree or a higher certification. And then if there's some sort of disagreement, it would end up in the county administrator's office to make a determination. Today, the code says at the very end of J, if there's a disagreement between the personnel director and department head on employee's eligibility or the raise, it shall be done by a consensus determination of the remaining county department directors. I'm curious if that has ever been used, because the other reason I stand before you is not to advocate on any specific disagreement or certification or degree or anything like that. I'm here to advocate for, on behalf of all employees, union and non, that this certification policy is to encourage employees to seek higher levels of training and degrees to benefit the county that all the employees do. Some employees take advantage of this and some don't. I'm one that I have in the past and been awarded this. But there needs and there must be consistency when someone reads sort of the preamble of this policy to try to understand what qualifications they may be able to achieve in a higher pay rate, and the ones that, once it gets downstream a little bit, either will be denied to even be applied for, it won't be paid for by the county, Ultimately, maybe you'll get to that stage and it won't be approved by Mr. Coelho to get the raise that the policy set out to give. There are a bunch of examples that I've come to know. I knew a few of these. I don't need to get into specific examples unless you guys would like to hear a few. But the issue for me is very simple. This policy, as it currently is written and as it's being amended to be in front of you, it's not clear, and it doesn't outline consistent application of that to all the different departments in the county. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. But
Before I give it to Commissioner Sweeney, Alan, you want to answer those two questions?
I'll certainly try to. Right now, the county administrator is not involved in the process, so this would put him in the process. So he could approve it, a P215 request. And there is a process. This policy has a form. An employee has to fill out a form. They get it signed by their department head. They sign it. And then it is forwarded to the personnel office for review. This would also, and obviously if it complies with the policy, then they receive a P215, but it is not retroactive. Paragraph H is about the actual payment of the pay change, not whether it's approved. It's basically once I sign the paper saying that starting on this day you get the pay increase. That's what H is related to. So it's about when the pay increase is effective, not whether or not you, so no one is permitted under the policy to start a certification without submitting a form, an application form first. It's a training and certification form. I've had it since 2001 when this policy was originally adopted as P80 back in those days. So the process has been the same. Disagreement sometimes occurs when an employee feels, less disagreement now because the policy very specifically says what's eligible. So the format that we're proposing to add allows other certifications to be eligible, and it sets up a process where a department head or an employee would basically pitch that this certification is valuable to the county and valuable to themselves. And the county administrator and I would determine whether it is or isn't, and then sign the form so the employee knows that they should and can embark on the process. These are standard forms that are used for every training that we do in the county now. All training is reviewed and approved, and if there's I even sign training forms that cost $0, so it's just a day in the life in the personnel office. Certainly the ones that cost money and will require reimbursement also go to the finance department for processing.
Thanks, Commissioner Angel. So, Mr. Coelho, the part in whatever option, item J, where the county administrator now replaces the complement of directors to make a decision.
Yes.
Has that ever been used?
Yes, early on in the process, there was a disagreement about a certification. The department heads all met, and ultimately, I was overruled, and those employees did receive it. But since then, I think a lot of those department heads at the time got some, I guess, feedback, I'll call it. And there haven't been any disagreements, or certainly, I wouldn't say that. There has been no interest in pursuing it that further, to that step, by department heads who essentially were in a meeting agreeing and disagreeing about whether a particular certification was eligible. My concern at that time, as it is always, is how many do you need of a particular certification? I mean, do you need 14 certified building officials? So if you are number 2 or 3 or 4, but your department head for one reason or another wants you to get that, and I'm not sure the county benefits from it or the employee, I might deny it. And this process, if that was the case, would have gone to this panel of department heads. Now the county administrator would just resolve it.
So do you think by removing the panel of the complement of directors and putting the county administrator in charge of those decisions of appeal is a better process?
I do.
Mr. Connolly, do you think that's a better process? Yes or no?
I don't know. I mean, lots of situations depend, so I'm sorry I didn't answer your question.
Yeah.
But there are specific cases where potentially an appeal to Mike as currently written or an appeal to the other department directors could have yielded a different result, where I would presume the employee had no idea that there was even an outlet for that. I've been informed of multiple cases in the past week or so since this went out where these decisions are arbitrarily made. Mr. Coelho just alluded to one where he decided that a certain percentage or number of people in a certain division are eligible for P215 and the others aren't. Well, show me in this policy where it says that, or show me where it's even proposed to say that. It doesn't. That's the inconsistency, uncertainty, and lack of clarity in this from anybody embarking on this to benefit the service to the county. And in doing so, get the incentive of a higher pay rate to pursue that better service for the county.
So just so you know, I've been a supervisor for a long time. I've dealt with this. My philosophy has always been that you train your employees so they can leave. You treat them well so they don't want to. So the arbitrary selection of saying, no, you already have 4 certified people, you don't need 6. To me, that shouldn't be even a case if the certification's there. If every teacher in Smyrna School District happened to be a doctor, they're not going to say, well, you know what, we already have 3 doctors in the math field, we don't need any more, we can't pay for your doctorate. It's not the way it works. So if I would like to see a policy like that in here.
So since it's a 20-year-old policy, you can imagine we've gone through lots of changes over
Sure.
time. And you're bringing up a perfect example of why the pre-approval is what it is. It's not arbitrary. It just requires pre-approval before you embark. So you don't embark and then find out you're not eligible. You have to get pre-approval before you start the process. So back when the process started in the early 2000s, employees figured out fairly quickly, because it was worded in a very broadly written way, similar to what you're suggesting. And so I do have numbers. So if you're curious how much P215s have raised salaries in the county by the participants, it's over $250,000 employees have received in additional compensation over the 20 years by receiving a P215. And of course, that's compounded each year when they get a COLA and a step increase. So it has been substantial increases. But back in the early thousands, obviously when salaries were much lower, like in 2002, 64 employees got a P215 costing $41,000. And that was followed quickly thereafter in 2004 of $51,000. So the commissioners and staff recognized right away that this was getting out of hand because it became unaffordable. You can't predict when you're doing the budget who all is going to be asking for a P215. And that's when these very specific certifications were put in, because everything's got to be within the budget so that you don't bust it. And when the adjustments were made, it went down to a more reasonable and manageable and easier to predict figure of around $6,000 a year for P215s. And that stayed pretty consistent, although last year it was $19,000 was paid out in P215 increases. So that's really the reason why it is not so broadly written, and it's so that you can budget for it.
Right, so the broadly written still allows for an employee to get the certification or the advanced degree to bolster their salary, but has there been arbitrary denials of that request based on you already have too many certified people in that position in the
So we really haven't had that many requests like that I can recall. Like I said, it's a 20-year-old policy. I do get lots of requests now for a P215 that I have to deny because it's not written in the policy as eligible. So I'll get requests regularly, like, I'd like to get a certification in something. Am I eligible? And they'll do that before they fill out the form. And, I just referred to the policy. There's really not a mechanism in place to add any other certifications other than what is listed in D.
Okay.
Mr. Hall and Mr. Pepper?
Thanks, Commissioner Angel. Just rhetorical start. I mean, if the policy is expensive, perhaps we should just abandon it. But I believe that we created the policy because we recognize the value of the credential ultimately to the residents of the county. And so the cost associated with that is just sort of the cost of doing business. And so, what's the critical mass, the credentials that we need and the credentials that we don't need. And perhaps maybe that's what we need is at least 80% list, 90%, these are the credentials, these are the positions in which these credentials would be, funded, and these would not. So we have something in writing so that every employee could look up, see what the policy is, see if they could qualify, what credentials could they qualify for, and be reimbursed, and then submit the form, and then go through the process, rather than it be not clear how many in a shop might be, deemed the appropriate number of certified or credentialed people versus, we only need 6 out of 8 or only 5 out of 8. So I guess that's my point.
So I might wonder the value of a CPA paramedic, or paramedic with a CPA. So in a broadly worded policy, what would prevent a paramedic to embark upon earning a CPA? I guess it wouldn't be a bad thing. I'm just not sure what the value to the county would be to have that. And of course, there'd be other iterations of that across the county. So the need is an important factor, and that's why the pre-approval is there. It's like, what's the benefit to the county, who's going to give you a raise, and obviously a benefit to the employee. But right now, it's a closed door. And I did try to, when I was asked to propose a method for additional certifications, I did try to write down all of them. But you would be constantly amending the policy, adding something else that somebody else has come up with. So that's why I thought this might be a better way. Have the department head, have the employee pitch why they believe this would be valuable to the county, valuable to themselves. County administrator and I was the county administrator, would weigh heavily in that decision, would decide whether or not it was eligible and approve it before they start the process, because that pre-approval's always been part of the policy since the beginning.
If I may, I wonder if the department heads could very quickly come up with a list of credentials associated with each position that would be, directly associated, direct contribution. I mean, obviously, a paramedic with a CPA, I wouldn't think that in the first place. But there are probably credentials that, nationally recognized, regionally recognized, state recognized credentials that make perfect sense per each position, and you could probably define that fairly quickly with the department head's help. And then it would, so as an attachment to the policy wouldn't have to be updated every 6 months to a year, but you could update the list of approved credentials and per position probably fairly simply.
And the county administrator could we could develop that as well using this process and put it out there so folks can see what would be considered favorably for a P215 increase. Keeping in mind, as I said, that some may not have as much value to the county in other departments and others, obviously.
Mr. Pepper and Mr. Sweeney?
Thank you. As far as item J, last sentence, any disagreement between the personnel director and department head on an employee's eligibility or percentage raise to be awarded shall be resolved with finality by the county administrator. And it was what was marked out was a consensus determination of the remaining county department directors. In fairness to the employees, why can't we leave it up to them to decide who to hear it, whether it be the county administrator or the remainder of the county department directors? I think that'd be fair to everyone and give them a choice. It'd sort of be like being tried by a jury as opposed to being tried by a judge. So,
At least the indications that I've been getting from commissioners for the past several months is that you want to vest more authority in your county administrator, and this is one way to do it.
but this would do that, but it would allow the employee to make the decision as to how they want to be heard.
Mr. Sweeney?
Thanks, Commissioner Angel. So in most of those items, it says that the training, certification, or whatever must be in the employee's current field of employment. Doesn't that cover, I mean, isn't it broad enough to say that, okay, if CPA for someone who works as a paramedic is not their current field of employment, so that would be denied? Do you agree with that, Mr. Connolly? And it's not appealable because it's in the code. It's right there in the policy. It says. So, I mean, to me, I'm still not sure adding the county administrator as the next level to make a decision when there's a conflict. Goes right along with exactly what Mr. Coelho said, that we're trying to vest more in our county administrator as the leader of the day-to-day business for the county. So.
Yes, so disputes about value are often engaged between me and department heads, and that's why I think having the county administrator resolve those. He could say whether the CPA meets that requirement or not.
I'm going to pipe in here real quick, too. If there was a conflict, Mike would probably be the best, Mr. Pettermaj, our county administrator, would probably be the best, since he is our only employee and he works under us. And in the line of how we do our order of things, I think it's a good idea that he is in the line of fire, if it should be that way, or not. But, you know, as the president always said, he's our chief potentate. He's the one that makes the decisions, and having him part of the process by just adding him, I think it's a checks and balance system. At least that's the way I see it. I'm not that we're trying to create a new hierarchy of order, but it's just common sense. That's just the way I want to say my 2 cents. Mr. Buxton?
You all heard that. So I walked in late, didn't anticipate us starting with this, although I came here for a couple of reasons. One of them was this one. As you're aware, you get the packet sometime Friday, over the weekend, whatever. We're off Monday. You don't get a chance to do a lot of work because obviously Tuesday's a work day for me, so I'm not all the way up to speed on this. But it's in committee, so I wasn't too concerned. And then I learned in talking to a few folks, this is somewhat contentious. Because the idea that I had was when an employee's stuck and feels like they shouldn't be stuck, we want to create a path out of that. Either, well, we want a final say. So it makes total sense to me. So that's what I hope this language was intended to do. Did I miss anything in the reading? So I'm still in favor of that. If there needs to be an overhaul of the language based on an email that I got and a few other comments from others, we can do that. But I don't know if we have to hold up this particular policy change tonight in order to do that, is the question that I would ask. But I don't know, because I don't know the direct impact it has to the folks that might be here in the audience. I don't know their purpose for being here, but if they are in fact here for this policy, I'm uneducated on the impact that it has on them, so I want to be educated. I can only tell you what I know right now and what it does right now. I do know that I started with the state in the 90s, 91. And at that time, I could take an educational trip out of Bowers to watch people clam, and you could get a credit. So I have a fitness management master's degree. Because I was hired as a certification candidate, they pay me as a master's level instructor, even though my master's degree is not in the field of education. They changed that, but I was grandfathered in. They changed it because they couldn't afford to pay people that way. They couldn't afford to pay me to take a ride on, the local waterways to learn about science when I'm not a science teacher. They paid me for it then because it was the law. They eventually changed it. So I sit with a master's plus 30 right now, and probably 20 of those credits are fluff credits. It's not illegal. It was what the policy was then. They changed it. So now, specifically, any credit that I want to get, and I could go for a master's 45 all the way up to a master's 60 if I wanted to. I could go for a doctorate. It would have to be in a specific instructional field or the major that I teach. What am I long-winded getting at is, I think it's important that whatever we're trying to do, it does just that. It has to pay for the value to the employee and to the taxpayer. It has to. Because otherwise it becomes costly, burdensome, out of hand. That's not to make a decision. I'm not weighing in on anybody tonight because I don't know. I just acknowledge that. So, Alan, you got a tough job. You're a firewall, right? You really are, right? I mean, you interact with every single person in the county. He's personnel director, unlike a lot of the department heads. He's the firewall. It's a tough firewall because I'm a state employee. I've been up to the personnel office unhappy with things. I've had to listen to school boards, superintendents, and folks hand down decisions I didn't like them at all. So I get where you are. Okay? I respect where you are, and if he thinks that it's wise to allow for assistance, to break that tie, to take the pressure off him, he may not say that, that's what I see. I think that's an ask we ought to look at. If we want to have a compromise where it's a jury or a judge and they want to pick it, I don't know. I don't know if I'm ready to make any of those decisions tonight. I am ready to say that in the one instance that I did bring up, I think a tiebreaker's fine. And I'd like to vote on that. Yeah.
Mr. Sweeney and Mr. Hall?
Thanks, Commissioner Angel. So just one last question, had to do with an email we received today. What happens if an employee gets that certification or gets a better degree in their current field of employment and it pushes them to the limit within their grade? What happens then?
So, and I was confused by that letter. I did get to see it, and disappointed by the letter as well. But
Mr. Quayla, can you talk in the mic a little bit? Yeah.
Yes, I did get to see the letter, and I mentioned I was disappointed by some of the content, and certainly misrepresented quite a bit of stuff. But if you are so one of the things it was suggesting is that when you get a P215, you shouldn't advance through the range. That was one of the things it was requesting. The reality is if you are at the max of the range, so you're at N, that's the current max, and you get a degree or a certification, you get to receive that percentage. You go over the max. That is what happens. It's happened.
You don't get the degree and then come back and say, well, sorry, you maxed out in your grade. You're not going to get,
you get pre-approved. You get it when you complete the degree, yes.
Okay.
All of that is pre-approved. It's part of the process, pre-approval.
So, Mr. Connolly, has that been through the employee council, that suggestion or that issue?
Not the specific issue. I think what the email was trying to say is, what Mr. Coelho just said is if you are maxed out and then you get your certification, you can go above.
Right.
If you get a certification before you get maxed out, you miss a step. It takes up one of your steps, whereas somebody who gets it at the end gets the extra step. That's the discrepancy.
Does that make sense?
I mean,
Yeah.
we have, You know, some people get degrees later in life, some get them earlier in their career, and most of this usually happens when they're maxed out and get a degree. And I don't know that we'd want to encourage them not to get a degree because
Right.
there's no reward at the end. But
So then to Mr. Buxton's question, is this something that we can work on in a future amendment of the policy as opposed to holding up this policy tonight? Mr. Buxton?
What you just presented makes sense. That's something that I think needs to be addressed.
And
But I'm
then,
not prepared to do it tonight.
Mr. Connolly, that's something that the council, employee council can take up?
Sure. I mean, we're happy to take up any of the additional, like, clarifying language that we were talking about when I first started speaking. And happy to look over it. We didn't have a great deal of time either to get into this.
Gotcha.
So that's why we thought it was important to come and at least let you be aware of this ourselves.
Okay.
And I was contacted by multiple employees, not just the email that you received or talked to in the hallway, about situations that I didn't know. And it seems like, and this is not verified information, but hearing other people's stories, there's a lot of variability in the approval of this. And if you're a new employee and I'm an existing employee and I have a certification that you want to come get and I've got it, and I got the 215, is it not logical that you would also get the 215? You wouldn't get up to there and apply for it and be like, nope, Jody, you're the 5th. Sorry about your luck. That's the inconsistency of the application of this policy that detracts from the morale of an organization or a group of people who are all doing the same job. Certain people get paid more to do the same thing.
Right, and
We-
I've
we've
already said
talked
that I
about this.
disagree with that, because
Right,
you
no,
ought to be able
right.
to train everybody, and everybody get the benefit of getting that certification.
Right.
And then just the fact that you got the certification, you got the more money out of it, now you're treating your employees better, so you train them so they can leave, you treat them well so they don't want to. And I think that's kind of where we have been, as far as I'm concerned with the county.
yes, and I don't believe I can't recall a single situation that was just described where somebody got denied got to be on the list. If it's not on the list, then it's not approved.
Commissioners Halls and Buxton?
Thanks, Commissioner Angel. So just to throw it out there, I mean, if we're revising a policy and I don't know of an urgent need to do this, I don't know why we couldn't have the employee council and, you know, some of the issues that were brought forth outside of this. Because when I read the policy in the package, it seemed like it was very straightforward. I've seen this before. But then it was the commentary, it was the implication of, you know, arbitrariness and non-uniform application that really ought to be ironed out, and so that we just have a consistent policy. You know, let's just do it all in one time, and by just delaying it, tabling this until we can get a policy that, you know, is comprehensive, you know, that creates the urgency that the policy is going to be held up until it's all ironed out, rather than approve this tonight and then, you know, perhaps just let it linger or, you know, get lost. So that's my point.
I mean, we do have at least one employee, perhaps 2 or 3, that have been waiting. Right now, they're not eligible because it's not on the list. So basically, they're being prevented from receiving their P215 increase. I mean, that's what's happening. That's why there's a retro date of the 17th, so that someone who did get a certification of 2017, they could request that that certification that they receive be eligible. It would not be retroactive, but it could be eligible upon approval by the county administrator. So there's some urgency because commissioners have been contacted by employees who recognize that they're not covered by the policy as currently written, but could be with these revisions.
Commissioner Buxton?
Alan, did you come up with this idea on your own?
I was asked by Commissioner Pepper to address the issue of additional certifications, And yourself, you have asked me to address
I did.
the department head approval.
So you're here tonight because we asked you to
Yes, sir.
do this, right? So I appreciate you taking the heat, but this is certainly self-inflicted by us, so just want to state for the record that the difference, I think, is a rewrite versus an amendment. Tonight, we're amending this, right? If we want to do a total rewrite, which it appears it would be required to address some legitimate concerns, that's going to take a little longer. So I suggest we amend tonight and then focus on a total rewrite. That way we can take care of some of the current individuals who are being harmed while at the same time looking to address the concerns of the group in its entirety. So that's what I would suggest. You said there's a list. So the scenario that was presented, possibly in a hallway, where some individuals were the fifth person to get the certification. So 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 were kept off because in your belief that only 4 were needed for that particular. Is that fair to say that that's happened, just not frequently?
I can't think of any circumstance when that's happened.
So you don't.
No.
But
Is it possible that there could be a limitation? I suppose. The denials that have occurred have been because they're not on the list.
outright denial is because of a list that's generated not by you, but by who?
It's in the policy, D. It tells you what you can get a P215 for.
So the policy that we adopted created that.
It doesn't have a mechanism. This would create a mechanism where other certifications could be covered, yes.
So the policy that we adopt tonight could address, if there was perceived slight because of that, the policy we adopt tonight could fix that.
Yes, and it even has a retroactive date to January 1st of 2017. So all of those others could be looked at and considered by the county administrator.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Any other questions, gentlemen? Yes, sir.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. My name is John Witzke. I'm the president of Local 781. However, I'm here today in a capacity.
Hold on 1 second. Because we're in union negotiations, I got to ask our lawyer. I don't want to break the union law. Is he allowed to speak on this subject, sir?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead, John.
I'm here representing Department of Public Safety, not the local union. Our concern and our contention with this policy is that it is being unfairly applied. Case in point, we've had discussions with our Special Operations Lieutenant regarding policy changes that were approved by the Personnel Director. Made it more advantageous for our medics to attain certain certifications to perform certain duties under the Special Operations umbrella. Those duties entail the NASCAR medics, our technical rescue teams that do confined space, high-angle rescue, and trench collapse calls, our all-response terrain team, which is our bike team, and our SWAT medics. Once the policy was relaxed, we had a group of people that applied. Mr. Koala came back to then, at a labor management meeting, the president telling him, I'm not going to approve these 12. I will give you 4 or nothing at all. And they'll be the 4 most senior medics. We try to explain to Mr. Koala the rationale for the number of people we have on these teams. And if you keep it at a minimum, if something happens where you lose a couple of those due to illness or inability to function, where do you find your backups? So we feel that his comments of I've not denied are kind of incorrect. All right. We also feel that the application of this should be even and equally adjudicated across the realm of our division, whether it be a field paramedic who's part of a local, our supervisory staff who have to do the same type of training, or our administrative staff. They're not being done. It's not being fairly adjudicated across the board.
Okay, John, I have to ask this. Well, because we're trying to add Mr. Pettermaj, our county administrator, as the final person, what better for checks and balance if it's denied than to go to Mr. Pettermaj to overrule then?
If that's the way they want to go, that's fine, but we haven't been going that way. It's been arbitrarily determined by the personnel director.
But it's my understanding, that's what we're trying to do tonight, by adding Mr. Pettermaj to the equation?
Well, I'm sorry, I'll let you speak, sir.
No, Mr. Quayla?
So John is got the whole issue confused. So I'm talking about policy P215, and he is talking about a provision that has been negotiated with the union. If you read this, you'll notice there's no SWAT paramedic, there is no high-angle rescue, there is no NASCAR medic. That's because it's not on the list.
So this is a totally different issue is what you're saying.
It's not on the list. The union has negotiated a process outside of P215. This was negotiated. It was negotiated for many months in the Labor Management Committee with his predecessor, where there was a previous process that the members did not like, which required you to get a certification out of a Band A, which is 4 items, and a Band B. We call it Band A and Band B. And they didn't like the process. They wanted to update it to a very specific types of certification. So this is just union negotiations outside of the policy, because these are not permitted under the policy. So it just applied to the union members. And those were eventually agreed to by the union. And part of that agreement was that only 4, not 12, people would be approved for it, even though they wanted 12 approved during this first year. And that's how the process ended. Now, I do understand that some field supervisors who are not in the union also wanted to get a P215. I couldn't approve it because it's not permitted under the policy as currently written. So did I deny extra requests under P215? No. Did I deny them under an agreement negotiated with the union, which doesn't follow P215? It's got a completely different procedure. Yes, I did. I thought 12 was too much for a procedure that had just been negotiated. So I agreed to 4, and I further agreed that after a year, we would evaluate how effective that new procedure was and perhaps approve additional ones. We are just at the 1-year mark, and we just talked about it at the Labor Management Committee meeting this month, that once I get a report on who has maintained their certifications, who has participated, that was one of the big factors, and maintain their training, actually put the hours in to maintain that training, then we would consider it. That's what was agreed to with the union. But it doesn't follow P215. It's a procedure outside of P215.
Okay, so this is a totally different subject than for negotiations.
And, and we'll be starting negotiations with the union soon. I've already been notified by AFSCME Council 81 that they do want to renegotiate the contract. This would be perfect for them to try to negotiate into their contract if they would like. So I know he's given you an SOP. Of course, I don't write the SOPs. We understand that that's a protocol that is developed by the department head, Chief Faulkner. And I know it references 215, but it really is extra 215 because Levy Court adopts policies. Department heads can have rules and procedures in their departments.
Commissioner Sweeney?
So just to be clear, there's SOPs, which can be overridden by policy, which can be overridden by labor union contract.
Yes.
And the labor union contract takes precedence over anything else that might come out of the director of the department or our policies at the county level.
This is not in our labor contract, sir.
This is not?
That is not.
No, it wouldn't be.
No, it would not. We have no language in our CBA referencing the P215. This was drafted by Lieutenant Mick, who is a non-union member, the team leader for the special operations, under the direction of, I believe, the personnel director and the director of public safety.
So
It was brought to us.
by someone in your department.
Yes.
Was this approved by personnel?
So
That violates the policy and violates the contract of the union.
So it's Once again, it's been around for a long time. So way back, probably around 2000, I don't remember when the original policy was done. 15 plus years, how's that? Maybe only 10 plus. The policy in a previous version was wide open. And under that, paramedics and the union were able to get P215 pay increases, and then it was amended. So unions tend not to want anything to change. So they were concerned about those changes, and an arrangement was worked out where they could continue to receive a P215 or a pay increase, I shouldn't be calling it P215, a pay increase if they got these special operation certifications. Had two formats. That's how it's been since the day it was developed. And they requested, the union, that the format be amended. And that went through a lot of negotiations, because the original one went through a lot of negotiations as well. And that is how we got to what they're calling the SOP, which is, I'll say it's P215-like, but it can't be 215, because P215 says what it says. So I agree, this language is not in the contract specifically. It was worked out as a result of amendments to this policy years ago.
So I don't want us to get off on a tangent that it's union versus the county. This is, the ultimate goal is to have fair and equitable application of this across the board. If this is being utilized as a 215 requirement, just like an educational degree or a CPA degree for our folks in finance, then it needs to be adjudicated and treated fairly across the board to all that have received these, have attained these certifications. That's our contention. Our goal is to have a policy that addresses these items so that down the road, there is no question.
So just to be clear, the fairness part that you're looking for would then violate the contract with the union.
We have no contract regarding the 215.
No, you have contract regarding training, where only 4 employees
No,
in that.
That was an agreement based on the personnel director's, I guess, position on the number of applications he was getting. And it basically was a choice that we had to make. Do we want to go with 4, or do we want to say have nobody get compensated for their certifications? It was brought to the union to get the feel, because the majority of the people that are on these teams are union members. And like I said, I'm not trying to make this a union versus county employee thing, but it's just across the board. It was brought to the attention, we felt like we were in a corner. Either we do something that's good, or we piss off, pardon my language, the paramedics that took the time and put the effort into getting these certifications to perform these duties above and beyond their normal daily duties in uniform.
So the paramedics.
Commissioner Buxton?
Yes. Yeah, the paramedics they had a format that they could get a P215-like pay increase. They didn't like the format. Before the change, nobody got it, not even the 4 who did. Get it? Like, they could have followed that procedure, and they would have gotten their P215-like pay increase. They didn't want to, and none of them were following that. As soon as it changed, 4 did get it. 12 requests were submitted, and it was the entire negotiation process started out was, we consider the change, but it would not be a pay increase for everybody. That was not the intent of the change. It was an ease of administration, a confirmation that folks were actually participating in the special operations that they were getting a pay increase for and maintaining their training. That was, and of course, we're really going off into union negotiation kind of thing. If they would like language that reflects what's in their contract, they're welcome to negotiate it when we start that process in about a month and a half.
Commissioner Buxton?
So you chair this, correct? And my suggestion, right? Because we're stuck in mud right now.
Right.
And we're not going
And
to,
I don't want to get in the weeds
we're
regarding
going to
union
decide
versus.
this tonight, right? I can tell you this from the understanding I get from what you're saying and the folks behind you. I'm sure everything you're saying is factual from your point of view, and there's no question about it. I sit here and not educated enough to weigh in. I understand where Alan is, and I can certainly tell from his position he's factual in what he's saying. I would request, Commissioner Angel, that you, as well as maybe, I don't know, Commissioner Sweeney or somebody else that's in administration, broker a meeting, come back with some information so we can solve this, so we can have a better discussion rather than do this tonight. Because I don't think we're getting anywhere tonight, is what I would suggest. But the points have
I
been
think that's
made.
what we're looking at.
Yeah, the points have been made, they're fair. Yeah, I think really what we're looking at is, what don't we like about the policy? And then let's help Alan so that he doesn't have to take the heat. If the policy, as you presented, is not lining up, then I've not heard Alan say he doesn't want a better policy. If he wants whatever's on, he doesn't want a motion, he wants whatever's on the paper. So that's where I am. The last question I have then is, though, and that might require somewhat of a rewrite. It's what I said earlier. Are we okay moving forward tonight, understanding that at the same time we move forward, we're going to seek a rewrite of the policy? Or, I don't know if it'll work. We might rewrite the policy. It may not impact you. Your remedy might be, if it's understood in a committee meeting, might be the negotiation, right? It might be. But are you okay with the policy itself tonight moving forward? Even though it's going to harm some individuals, because I'm okay with it moving forward.
If it leads to a discussion where we look at the policy and, get the language in there that recognizes the various facets across the breadth of the county employee workforce to include public safety, dispatchers, parks and recs, wastewater, I see no problem with that.
Ms. Sweeney?
So is there a pressing issue outstanding, waiting for this policy to be approved?
I mean, like I said, there's 2 or 3 employees who've been waiting for a while.
Do we have the authority, the 7 of us, to request that Mr. Pettimonge get involved without a policy and then table this until we do a complete rewrite?
So the policy, I'd love to sign off on all of those people, but when your finance folks go to approve it, they need policies that allow things.
Right.
Yes. So, especially when it involves money. So if it doesn't involve money, not so important, but when it involves money, they need to see, like, where's your authority to grant that? So it needs to be written somewhere. If commissioners would like to grant the county administrator broad authority to award raises and, budget changes, I mean, okay.
Right, so if we table this tonight and then rewrite the policy, it's retroactive back to this date.
Well, I wouldn't want to do retroactive pay increases because that's a nightmare in the payroll system. But you can have retroactive eligibility.
Have retroactive what?
Eligibility. So if somebody got the CBO today, or what CBO is actually listed, but if they got some certification that would be viewed as eligible, if they got it today, then they would, once the policy was adopted, they could get a pay increase once all the paperwork is signed.
Right, so tabling this is going to affect 3 employees.
3 or 4,
and,
maybe
pay
others.
increases for those 3 employees.
Or maybe others.
So it could be more than that. That'll be affected if we don't table it and we approve this, it's still going to be the same amount of time before there's any type of rewrite. It's not going to happen next
I mean,
week,
rewrites take a while, and that you might not like the rewrite.
especially if we've asked Mr. Connolly and the employee council to get involved in this going forward. Tough decision, Mr. Angel.
Mr. Hall.
Thanks, Mr. Angel. Really quickly, recognize everyone's patience with this, but I would just say that if we're going to vote, majority vote to move this to a business meeting, that we set some sort of reasonable deadline. So if we approve this tonight, but we understand that we'll have subsequent action on this, we want to see it back in 3 months or 6 months rather than just leave it open-ended.
Well, what I was going to ask, I'm sorry, Mr. Pepper, go ahead, sir.
And just so we're clear, we're not tabling the whole policy, we're just tabling the amendments to the policy. We'll still have the existing policy in effect. So we're not doing away with the policy altogether, just the new wording on the policy.
Just the amendments. What I was going to ask is that Mr. Quaylen, Mr. Pettermaj, myself, Mr. Sweeney, if he's available, and you, since you are our, I'm sorry? Just 3. So that we could have a sit-down discussion before we start, just to have a discussion first, a prelude to before we do anything else. And then based on that, take action on what direction to go. Mr. Pettermaj, does that feel like it's doable, sir?
Commissioner Angel, I think that I would certainly welcome the opportunity to meet with you and Mr. Quayle to deal with it. Listening to this debate, though, this whole thing was intended to create a little more flexibility in the process. That got lost in the sauce here tonight, folks. And to give a second read on decisions that are made. I think that got lost. Management has to make decisions. That's what managers do. And if, this is about decision making. And that's what policies are, to guide those decisions. I recognize the concerns. Some of the, prior to this time, the only time I ever heard from anyone about policy 215 is when they were denied because they never got pre-approval. Well, that's part of the policy it is today. So, these issues that are coming up tonight, I've never really heard a lot about them. I did know about the issue with the that Mr. Whiskey's talking about a month or so ago. Mr. Clark and Mr. Abramson came and talked to me about that, and I conferred with Alan, and he explained the situation with the labor contract. I wouldn't shy away from this proposal as it is right now. I think it gives some guidance, and if there's some tweaking that needs to be made to it, we can do that. But however you want to handle it, Commissioner Angel, I will certainly oblige. Thank you.
Well, now that you spoke, sir, it goes right along the lines of what I just said in the beginning. So I have no problem putting it forth, and then after this, we get together and try and iron out some of the rough spots. But to put it in place now so nobody's affected and they can come forth, I think it's a win-win situation. So at this time, I think I'd just like to say I'm ready to move this forth. Any other commissioners? Move this forth to the business meeting?
Yeah.
6 and 1 not voting, or 1 saying no. Okay, thank you. Any public comments on this one item? Any public comments? Seeing nobody move, Mr. President, before I give it back to you, sir, I just want to give an explanation why I asked you to move this forth. U.S. Senator Coons is supposed to be here in the building. This is my district, and I didn't get the call till about 20 of 7 that he was going to be here. That's why I asked the president to move this ahead of Mr. Howell and the sewer board people, but I'm going to go and meet him and try and make it back here real quick. So you'll have to excuse me. Back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Angel. Other Public Works, Mr. Howell.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have some distinguished visitors with us tonight, and Ms. Gold is going to lead the way.
Unfortunately, Joe Simmons had to leave, so we had some county folks here tonight that we wanted to thank as being part of our team tonight. So I still want to make sure we acknowledge them. So Kelly Pitts, Mike Harrington wasn't able to make it tonight, but I'm going to turn it over to Debbie with KCI so that she can introduce the team that worked on the US 13 sewer rehabilitation project, or slip lining project in North Dover.
Thank you. We'll try to be brief. I understand you have a longer agenda after us. Thank you, commissioners and members of the public. Tonight, we're here to give our project closeout presentation for the Kent County Levy Court Commissioners US 13 Sewer Rehab Project. It was 1 year ago on this date that we presented to the Sewer Advisory Board, which was very interesting because within 1 year, we've had the entire wrap-up project. I'm going to go over just a quick brief project overview before I introduce our great team. The project team sitting behind me to the left successfully installed over 15,000 linear feet of sewer pipe within 6 months from Garden Lane to West Denny's Road. The construction contract value bid, roughly $5,155,944. The final is under budget at $5,122,508.44. What I'd like to actually emphasize here is on time and under budget. It's not all the time that you get to speak on projects like this with especially the county staff and the great team behind us, once again, on under schedule and under budget. So a project like this had several different services that we had to provide with, once again, it's not just one person. This was the initial kickoff meeting on the left-hand side, and I did not get to capture everybody, but there was a lot of agencies, a lot of services provided. Construction contractor, project management, construction inspection, community outreach, design and permitting, traffic safety. We were all surrounded by your project as the owner. So with us tonight, you're very familiar with Diana, Director of Public Works. What we'd like to say is just a couple extra shout outs as we do some introductions. Diana was critical in handling the press, which we very much appreciated. So it kept us in line with the press, as well as your direct liaison as the director to the Levy Court Commissioners and the County Administrator. Andy Ridgey is the Assistant Director of Engineering. We could not have done this project without Andy, his continual coordination and his availability to do problem resolutions throughout the project. Mike Harrington, who's not with us tonight, is Utility Construction Coordinator. He was our local field knowledge for the decisions. So he represented the county on a local level and helped us make the decisions that would protect the county and their interest. Kelly Pitts, also this could not have been done without her, and Joe Simmons, as our database administrator. They went above and beyond, because as much as I do like the team, we had to work on Fridays last minute to get everything out to the public. So we dreaded every single Friday just about on this project, but we got the information out quickly. Kelly and Joe did a great job getting the website up with current information. Kelly did the next door, Facebook, social media notifications, and we really appreciate the above and beyond service. And we just want to say that without these people working for the county in their capacity, we could not have been successful on the project. Also with us tonight is Mike, and I'm not going to say this right, Mike M. So Mike did all the estimate work for George and Lynch, which was great because we knew what things were going to cost, what had to take place. Then we have Danny Walls with us. Daniel Walls, very knowledgeable. I get paid $5 later for saying this, but he's very knowledgeable and was a huge problem solver in the field. I can't tell you that what a great foreman he was in the field to work with everybody. We have Preston Ayers with us tonight. The scheduling, the management, and the smooth process made it a lot easier for us. There was several hours, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night that I'd see him and Chris or him and Dan in our office going through scheduling last minute changes. Danny's making field modifications. So that team worked really good and it was a smooth process. Also with George and Lynch tonight is Len Brooks with the business development. And then our team, which you're familiar with, which is Dan Strings, the project manager, and Chris Rubino is the construction inspection manager, and then myself as the community outreach manager. We do not really want to get into bragging rights because we couldn't have done it without the village of people. Once again, we want to thank our project partners. As you know, in the very beginning of the approach, this was critical. The project was located in the city of Dover, and we wanted to make sure the confusion wasn't there of who owned the sewer, whose jurisdiction it was. Also, the funding from USDA the coordination for DELDOT on a state-maintained road, and DENREC as well. So I want to just go over briefly a couple incidents or a couple situations that we ran into that made the team actually accelerate versus a normal project. There was 6 other projects going on at the same time. Sometimes you knew about them, sometimes you did not. So we had the Lidl getting installed, or new construction on US 13. The Aldi, all the Capitol Station development was happening at the same time as our project. City of Dover was installing new light poles, doing the upgrades. DELDOT had a large sidewalk project. They also had a large fiber project. And Dunkin' Donuts was going in near KW Boulevard. So that's 6 competing, I'm gonna say, for jurisdiction and rights to get your signs and barriers out first. I'm not gonna say we won, but we did a pretty good job. Under the traffic controls, what those 6 projects did was create additional work for determine our duration and limits of the project. We had to avoid the overlaps of sign. Every single project had their own sign plan for traffic. Detour here, move here. You know, if you looked down US 13 this past year, there was a lot going on. We took a lot of calls as well for a lot of their projects and got to say in a nice way, call this person, it's their project, call this person. A lot of coordination with DELDOT, and they were very critical in the project. It also changed the prioritization and restrictions and the flexibility in the schedule. So our contractor team, our construction management inspection team was very flexible in their hours and what they could and couldn't do. Sometimes not by choice. So in the sequencing change, we did have some changes to our original outreach. So we had extended closures in front of CF Schwartz, the Delaware State Police Headquarters, and West Denny's. And then we also had an additional safety closure at West Denny's on the Deltec North entrance. And what we want to say here is we want to give a lot of kudos to CF Schwartz, Delaware State Police Headquarters, Deltec. They were phenomenal. When we had asked for additional time or additional closures, and we explained why, they were very, very good at addressing and communicating and their flexibility. So I think getting in front of the public really helped building the relationships where hopefully it was seamless for you as commissioners. There was one sequencing change that had to do with a field efficiency method. So in McDonald's and Yukon area, we anticipated a problem in this area based on the line with the field conditions, and they came up with an alternative option which allowed us to remove an excavation pit. So instead of have this turn lane, the southbound U-turn lane, closed multiple times, we actually met and talked with McDonald's and Yukon, and they said they would rather just have it closed for an extended duration, get it done, and get out of there. So we gained project time by actually communicating with McDonald's Yukon and having some field efficiency methods in place. This is some of your existing pipe conditions, which you're very familiar with. We're going to show you some great video that'll make you hungry as soon as we get done presenting. So basically on the 2 CCTV films that you see on the right-hand side, when we have a cleaning issue due to blockage, the first thing they do is go out and try to camera the line. The camera actually determined that there was a collapse or deteriorated pipe in these areas. So the team had to improvise with the field techniques. If the blockage was removed, they could proceed. If the blockage remains, sometimes there was extra excavation, and we had to remove the old pipe, the host, and then we had to restart cleaning and do the camera again. This is very tedious. It's almost, it's like a whole train of different sequencing that had to take place. And then we can continue with the slip lining pipe. So what I'd like to say about this team, you're gonna see there's some county representation in there as well. We actually had a field pizza party for all the field people that were in the trenches and doing the work every day and having the vehicles go by as fast as they could in the traffic area. So this could not have been done with this team. And I'm gonna say on this field team, we're gonna go into some very unique techniques that they did. So as far as field conditions, and we talk about improvised techniques, this is where I'm gonna brag on the field. There's 3 that you're gonna see in this picture, the drill rod, the reamers, and the brooms. This is when we had those clogs and those blockages. Sometimes it could take 3, 4, and 5 techniques to get through that area. And when I say they're working diligently, using MacGyver equipment as much as possible to get this through so we can keep going. There's also grappling hooks that were used, lateral drill heads, and they made adjustments to the pulling heads as well. So there's 3 different techniques just in this one area, this one blockage. So they literally were problem solvers in the field. We're going to briefly go over 5, because I think this is what you want to, this is the bragging rights pretty much on the teamwork resolution. And this included the county staff, the contractors, and your consultants. 5 areas where we had issues. The southbound U-turn south of Jeffrick Boulevard, right in front of our office. Dover Downs, the Delaware State University entrance, northbound U-turn, the North Dover Mall entrance, and then Rustic Lane intersection and US 13 lane reduction. Some of these weren't even on our original list of things to be able to do the outreach on. So at Jeffrick Boulevard, there was an additional excavation and pit location, which turned into expansion of the construction area. It increased our construction protection area, which means we have to take some lanes, which changed our transportation lane and crossover closure. This required additional outreach because we have a church with a daycare. We have Wolfie's, we have a karate studio. That plaza there is very, very highly used during the entire weekday and weekends. Every one of these stakeholders were good to work with. The church was really good, Wolfie's, the karate studio, the schools, the churches, the hotels. We got out in front of it, we explained to them, instead of open and close again, we'd like to go a little, we'd like to do an extension, and we have some change of lanes. Everybody is very flexible in it. They just wanted to know ahead of time. So we'd really like to give kudos to our stakeholders on this project. Next is Dover Downs. This was the one that I probably could have killed the entire team on. This required, they did a really good job, but on the outreach side, it was tough to make these calls. Additional excavation and pit location. We had a new construction area here and new traffic. We actually did a partial close for Dover Downs exit and the southbound left turn lanes. We coordinated with DelDOT and Dover Downs, and we even had to coordinate an internal truck route coordination that actually Dover Downs took over and did for us, because we did this on the week of race week, on the Tuesday of race week, and Dover Downs was flexible and worked with us. This was a heavy lift to call them and actually ask. We said, how about between Sunday and Tuesday? They said they preferred Sunday, and we said, okay, Tuesday. And they still worked really, really well with us. So your stakeholders wanted this to get done, and they worked well. It required additional outreach. They were great to work with, and the team was out of there in under the amount of time that we thought we'd be closed. Another one is Delaware State University entrance and northbound U-turn near the South Mall entrance. You probably didn't hear about any of these because they were resolved. So we moved the pit location because it was homecoming weekend. Of course, that's the way the schedule works. So this team decided to move the pit location so we did not deter any homecoming vehicle traffic at all. Additional excavation, and there was 2 pit locations, so we could avoid an intersection close right in front of the college. This was a cost-effective approach to avoid any kind of road replacement. So once again, it's really rare you're gonna see a team that's gonna think about time, money, vehicles, and homecoming. This is another one, the North Dover Mall entrance. We had additional excavation and pit location. This was a new construction area, and we had to do coordination with DelDOT. And then we go to Rustic Lane. This is another fun one. We prepared for the worst case scenario because there was an old pipe to a liner section. So what the team did was ground the transition of pipe for continuation of slip lining, and we had to do advanced coordination of closures with Lowe's and Chick-fil-A. DelDOT basically said, you're not gonna do it unless they agree. We went in and talked to them, we agreed. We agreed twice. I had to go talk to them twice, and it worked because they did not have to close any entrance at all for Chick-fil-A or Lowe's. So the stakeholders, once again, were great to outreach. The team, we didn't even have to use that process of closing. So it's hard to see this image, but we are here to tell you that we're gonna break the myth tonight because turtles really do live in sewers. Our team found, I won't say the brand name of it, but something turtle in the sewer system, and you'll see a better, clear picture there. So we are here to say that the myth is true. We have validated it, verified it. I hope somebody still has it, that turtles do live in the sewers. We recommend children do not put these in there. Solved all the problems of the world tonight. And then there's just a couple more. Maybe not. Oh. So in closing, what I want to be able to say about this project and the great, I think the team and the county working everything together, is the successful project components of this team. Continual communication, almost too much. I mean, we talked and talked and talked, met, conference calls. The county was always available. It was day and nights and weekends. The professional respect of the positions. You get a lot of people with a lot of different backgrounds, and I think everybody worked really well and respected themselves. Problem resolution was above and beyond. We all wanted to fix the problems. We all wanted to move forward. Advanced preparedness, looking ahead. What if our problems are ahead? What do we need to put out? What fires could potentially happen? And the community awareness, by you investing in the community awareness and outreach, it made it so much easier to go talk to everybody. We could pick up the phone and call somebody. We could pick up the phone and call the owner of this business or the president of this college. That made it a lot easier because we were out in front of it. Very strong management. Everybody did their job and did it right and did it professional. Local relationships, the entire team is local. That, I cannot stress that enough. That's a lot to do on a project like this. We know who to call and when to call, the entire team. And then the experience and knowledge was way above and beyond as well. So the biggest bragging right that I probably have to give, besides the knowledge, the troubleshooting, the situations we ran into, being under budget, on time, is everybody on this team wanted and worked hard for successful completion. Every single person that touched this team wanted it to be successful. This was a very high-profile case. Every person contributed in a valuable way, whether it was the website, whether it was a social media outreach, whether it was the safety in the field, whether it was DelDOT, contractors, construction management inspection. Every single person that touched this project was appreciated and was very valuable. And we accepted your challenge with pride. So the one last statement I'd like to leave you with is we would like to thank you for trusting this team with your high-profile sewer rehab project. And we look forward to doing future work with you as well. And is there any questions? Thank you. And thank you again to the staff, to Andy and Diana. You're priceless in the project.
Debbie, I thank you and all of your cohorts for coming out. There's no question this is a great success, great partnership. And just thank you for coming out here, spending your time. If we wrap up this presentation, you might still have time to have a beer and watch TV, unless you go to bed at 8:30. Then you can have a tight squeeze. But if there aren't any comments, we'll just thank you again. And you had a comment, Mr. President?
Just a quick comment. Debbie, there's a plethora of words that could be used to expound on the job that you and the team did. The many, many times that I went through Dover, this project was on time. It wasn't ever in a disastrous state. Everything was done perfectly. And I don't think any commissioner received any complaints. If they did, I'm not aware of them. So congratulations to you and your team. How many of your team are here?
So the project manager in charge is Dan String.
Have them stand up.
Chris Rubino, Construction Management Inspection. And then we have the 4 representatives from Georgia Lynch that we couldn't have done the work without the right contractor.
So have them stand up also.
Yep.
We're also hoping to get a photo opportunity with the
Yes,
commissioners.
shameless photo, we have posters.
What?
Thank you. Thank you. Okay,
Great job. Thank you so much.
thank you.
Would you mind if we could take the photo at this point? If the audience and you all would bear with us?
Sure.
Yes, Kelly needs to be a part of this. She's always taking the
Diana, you and Andy did a fantastic job. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're ready to roll when you are.
Okay, so the next item on the agenda is Paris Villa, London Village Sewer Area Extension, Easement Compensation, Rakesh and Krupa R. Patel. So the county requires a sewer easement for the septic elimination project. This is the last easement for the project. The owners have agreed to the appraised value. The appraised value is $1,070. It includes permanent and temporary sewer easements, and there's some more description in the actual memo about the square footage, which the permanent easement is 2,047 square feet, and the temporary easement is about 1,000 square feet. So with that, we're looking for authorization to make the offer and authorize the president to sign the easement agreement upon acceptance by the owner.
Any questions?
Yeah, I do.
Okay, go ahead.
How many more easements are we looking for after this one?
So there was only one more easement, but what we've decided to do, or we've determined, is that we're going to design around it. The feedback from the owner wasn't very positive, so that we're now need to finalize the design, and with hopes that we'll be bidding this hopefully early summer.
So this will be it, no more easements after this?
No.
Excellent, excellent, thank you.
No more questions. I'm ready to vote on it. All right in favor of the business agenda tonight. 6 up, item number 2.
Okay, the next item is also with the Paris Villa London Village Sewer Project. It's an extension or revision of the engineering service agreements. With this one, I'm going to probably turn it over to Andy. He's a little bit closer to this one.
All right, so this is basically, we're adding more work to the project. Originally, KCI was hired to just put the sewer design on plans and paper, and we were going to bid it out in-house. That was around the time that I went to the plant and we had an employee leave, so we didn't have the staff to do this, so we had KCI.
Multiple employees left.
Basically get them to put it on paper, and then the plan was we would prepare the bid documents. So now this is basically finalizing the documents, plus all the revisions we did, trying to redesign around easements, and also preparing the bid documents, helping us with bid phase, and some construction administration for these 2 sewer projects.
Mr. Sweeney.
Thanks, Commissioner Howe. So I've reiterated this a number of times over the life of this project, is to do everything we can to keep the cost low to the resident, because this is not an area that has a lot of resources. So I see that the interest rate's very low from USDA. There's a lot of grant money in there, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that we're not extending the cost beyond reason to the homeowner, correct?
Correct. And there are 4 motions tonight. The 4th one has authorizes the department to pursue additional DNREC and USDA funding, and
Okay.
authorize the president to sign such agreements when and if we need that.
All right, so my only concern was adding the $200,000 to this project and for the design. But I just want to make sure that we're still doing everything we can to mitigate and minimize the cost to the homeowner.
We're very sensitive to the affordability issue, and we will be continuing to look for all aspects to make this an affordable
All right,
project.
thanks, Ms. Gold.
Any other questions? Business item tonight? 6 up, next item.
The next item is chemical contract ferric chloride change order number 1. It's an extension of the contract with Chimera. So currently the plant uses ferric chloride in a couple different areas. We use it with the liquid train as well as the solid train. And we have an existing 2-year contract with Chimera. The contract expires on March 31st. So we contacted Chimera regarding an extension of the contract. They're unable to hold the current price, which is $512 per dry ton. and have proposed a price of $573 per dry ton, which is an 11.9% increase. So with that, I've provided some reasoning for why we are willing to look at an 11.9% increase. One is that Camara has been our ferric supplier for many years, and they deliver a quality product at low and competitive pricing. There are limited suppliers who actually bid the contract. In the past 6 years, when we've bid it twice, we've only had 2 bidders, Camara and PVS Technologies. At the last bid opening in March 2018, the high bid of $625 per dry ton was submitted by PVS. The proposed pricing is lower than the competitor's pricing at that time. And as suggested by the county administrator, I contacted PVS to see if they would give me a budget price. And the budget price they provided was $775 per dry ton. This is a material that we need at the plant, and this is the best deal that we're going to get on it. So there's a motion supporting the extension of the contract from April 1st, 2020 to March 31st, 2021 at a unit price of $573 per dry ton.
Questions, comments? Business item tonight? 6 up. Are there any comments on these 3 voting items from the audience? Seeing none, Mr. President, back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Howe. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening we have a community event promotional grant request from the town of Hartley for their Memorial Day Parade. County Administrator, you have something on that?
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Yeah, was received last week. I believe Commissioner Pepper may have been speaking with representatives from the town of Hartley. And this is a new event. It certainly does qualify for promotional grant money, and they've requested the maximum grant amount of $750, and they provided documentation showing that they will be spending well in excess of that in terms of or for promotional advertising and things of that nature, announcements and so on to promote their event, which is a Memorial Day holiday parade. So it qualifies. We recommend it. We provided you with the recommended motion. I don't know if Commissioner Pepper has anything to add?
Yeah, a while back, Mr. McGuire contacted me and asked me if I'd assist them with this, getting this grant on the agenda. And I tell you, Hartley's come a long way in the past few years, and this is just something that's going to help them get recognized for all that they've done in the past few years, and hopefully it'll take people to Hartley and let them see what a nice town Hartley is and what a nice town it can be. And it's been quite some time since they've had a parade in Hartley. I think this would be a great time to have a celebration, so I wholeheartedly support this.
Any other commissioner questions or comments? Move to a business meeting. All right, 6 up. Any questions from the audience? All right, back to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Mr. Buxton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I believe, Kim, are you going to be leading this? So why don't you come on up to the head table. If anyone else, any of the players in the room want to also come up, do we have chairs available?
Yes. Mr. Kennedy, can we find a chair for Ms. Kiefer, please?
Good evening, Commissioners. I was asked to give an update on the MGO project. This is a team of county employees that have started this project. Obviously, Susan Durham's here from Finance, and Sarah Kiefer is here from Planning. To my right, I have Dorothy Cheatham, who is the lead of the project, and County Administrator as well. And so this project, it's called My Government Online, and we started an agreement with a government agency in Louisiana to lease their software. And so we've started this project about a year ago, and we've been gathering requirements for their modules. Their modules improve workflow within the departments and between departments by providing automatic assignment for tasks to be completed and allow customers to track the progress on the permit's approval process. Customers can go online, create an account, and follow their permit through the building permit process. They can see steps of the building permit and when it has been completed. They can submit online plans and related documents, receive plans, review information and notifications, receive planning information for things like setbacks, restrictions, whatever the planning office has reviewed and has information to provide to them. The contractors can request inspections and receive notification as to whether or not their inspection has failed or passed. Letters can be automatically generated and sent out to the customer. Customers can see when payments have been completed. Correspondence between the customer and the staff can be done online. Most county jurisdictions operate differently, and so vendors as well as this government agency created a software package that is very flexible, and when it's flexible, it requires more work to set up. You have to configure it. So over the past year, the county IT office has been working with the planning office to gather these requirements, document it, and send it on to MGO, so MGO can then configure their system to be able to work with our business practices, procedures, workflow, and ordinances. And with this process, we try to make sure that we can improve workflow within the office. And one of the things we've done to do that is to be able to bring multiple systems together in one the best we can. For instance, when you're in the MGO project and you're looking at a case, you can pull up the county maps. You can look at Pride just by clicking on a link. Pride automatically comes up for you. When you put in an address, it goes out to our assessment system, pulls in the ownership information and all the parcel information that we have on the assessment system. It can link to the New World system to get sewer account balances and sewer information if it isn't a sewer account. And it can also link to deeds to bring up the most current deed. So where are we now? Well, in December, we saw this product, and it was in a state where we felt we could run with it and test it and work with it. So after December, MGO came on staff, came in-house in January 20th for a week and showed us how to use the system and provided training. And so ever since that week, after January 24th, the I&E staff has been entering in building permits. They've taken a lot of their closed permits and entering in each one. We have to enter in a permit. The way to test it is to enter in a permit for each application type, and there's 34 application types. And as you enter in the permit, you have to work through the workflow and then provide inspection data for the inspectors to inspect each of the cases and test each one thoroughly. And as I've done that, they've identified areas that need to be modified, customized to help Kent County's flow better. And we continue to do that. We continue to do testing and configuration changes. We're sending these changes over to MGO. They're making the changes, and then we get back together and test. At this point, our focus has mainly been on the building permit and sewer permit side, although we have given them information for code enforcement as well. That side hasn't been completely configured to date. MGO is very popular because there is no out-of-pocket cost to initially set it up. And so they have most jurisdictions in Louisiana and Texas. And over this month and next month, they're going live in 3 jurisdictions in Florida. So they've allocated their resources on those projects, and they have committed resources to Kent County the end of March and April. So they've committed 3 weeks straight for us. The first week is going to be remote access. We will be working through WebEx and testing and answering questions and trying to refine the system. And then the following 2 weeks, which is March 30th week and then April the 6th week, they will be on staff to help us and assist us. And that's where we are. We're making progress, we're moving forward, and it is a work in progress. So any questions?
Commissioners, questions? Commissioner Sweeney?
Thanks, Commissioner Buxton. So, Kim, and I have some experience with projects of this size. This is huge. I mean, I've learned the amount of effort that Dorothy went into to get information from soup to nuts on this was tremendous. To take that and to get it to MGO, how much did MGO have to change their process to match our process?
Well, they had to set everything up. I mean, if you think about it, we started in December 2018, in December, just working with the inspectors and finding out when they go out for this type building permit, which there are 34, what do you inspect? And when you inspect that, do you put a comment? Do you want a radio button? Or you want a checklist to say, I looked at this? You know, we worked with them on each of those items. All that needed to be documented and set up in this MGO project.
Right. So right now, and I've got to reiterate this. So back in the 90s, the state was working on a project called SAP. It was their ERP. It was their enterprise resource planning for everything HR related. They spent 10 years and almost $60 million on that project, and then they trashed it because they tried to rush it in, didn't work. Too much configuration changes had to be made for everything because they were trying to make SAP work, change SAP to work the way the state did. They completely trashed it and switched over, and now they're on PeopleSoft. And PeopleSoft came in and said, no, you change the way you do things to match what PeopleSoft does, and it makes it easier when you do updates later. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering, did MGO do the same thing with us? Or is it just minor configuration changes so that when a new release comes out later, or some changes, it's very simple for us to implement?
Well, I mean, the cases should be easy for us to implement. I mean, they did do configuration changes just for Kent County. I mean, because everyone operates differently. But I don't anticipate any issues when we go to upgrade.
Okay.
Because that's the way they've designed their software.
It's just very important that we get this right.
Yeah, it is important that we get this right. It's important that we spend the time on it now. And planning staff has been spending a lot of time on testing it, providing requirements to Dorothy, and Dorothy's been working with MGO to get those requirements set up and configured and completed.
All right, so how close are we to actually going live to starting to use this in-house?
Well, that certainly is a crystal ball, but I would say we just started testing. I mean, in January we got training, end of January we got training, February we just started entering building permits. So, I mean, we've got another couple months to really whip the horse, if you will, to really get in there and make sure everything's looking good. But that's just a gut feel.
So when that couple of months, is that enough time to get all of the different aspects of MGO in place, including credit card processing? We would love our constituents to be able to sit at home, put in a permit online, pay for it online, have, and be able to look at it. Is that even conceivable at this point?
It certainly is conceivable because Dorothy and Amy Minner spent a lot of time together just saying, okay, if someone is trying to submit this type of building permit, what kind of questions do we have? What kind of information do we need? And that work need to be done on every building permit type. And as I said, there's 34. But we haven't actually tested that. Like I said, they haven't even barely been testing for a month, maybe 3 weeks. So we haven't delved into that 100%. We're still working on the in-house piece. So there is an in-house piece which allows Kent County to create a building permit, go through the workflow of a building permit, and send data to, let's say if there's something in finance that needs to be approved, or they need a sewer permit, that type workflow. And the customer can still follow the building permit online. They can still go online and submit documents. They can see that, let's say it's failed for a setback, or they may then want to republish another plot plan, and they can do all that online with the in-house piece. So there's a lot of communication that can happen with just the in-house piece without having the online piece. And I'm not saying that we don't want to do it, I'm just explaining the functionality that we have. And let's see, what else do we have? When they can ask for a inspection online, they can see the results of that inspection. It's automatically emailed right back to them. So there's a lot of functionality if it were decided to go with the in-house piece while we still work on the online piece. But it is very conceivable that they're both ready at the same time.
Right. So with the in-house piece, it still adds a lot of communication, a lot of functionality that both the planning staff as well as applicants would benefit from if we went with the in-house piece as phase 1 of this implementation.
Yes, we definitely believe so.
Theoretically, we could go with the in-house piece and then continue to work on the online piece, which would also include some time for Ms. Durham to get the credit card vendor in place. Is that acceptable, Susan?
Yes, that's correct. We're aggressively working with it right now.
So my question about the credit card processing would be, are we adding the ability to work with MGO as a qualification for the vendor?
Yes, actually, that's our top priority for right now.
Okay.
I already have credit card processing to collect taxes and to pay sewer bills, but that vendor we need to get rid of. It's
right.
So we decided that in this mission, we would do MGO first, keep the other vendor until we got MGO up and running, and
start switching them over, the other functionality over to the new vendor.
We've narrowed it down to 2. As soon as I get the cost, then Mike and I can talk about it, but one of them has already worked with MGO, so it's really great.
So because we've already had that discussion on Levy Court concerning fees and all that stuff, that will not have to come in front of us anymore.
It does not, no.
So you just need to pick a vendor that's going to work, and you think you have one that'll work with MGO. So Kim, is that a phased approach that you're okay with?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if the online piece is not available, we certainly could go, I mean, Sarah, you want to weigh in on this? I mean, there certainly is benefits.
So the online piece is only for someone to submit from the comfort of their office or their home?
Just if they want to submit a building permit, just a building permit,
right.
That's the online piece, and pay for it online. Now, they can still follow their permit online. They can still upload documents online and
answer
receive
questions
documents,
and all
answer
that
questions
okay.
and all
so
that.
that
Yes.
functionality is
With
going to
the
be with the in-house piece.
Yes.
Sarah, are you okay with that?
That was actually my plan.
Good.
Our thought was we test for as long as we need to test, and then we adopt it in-house, right? Both to make sure it works smoothly, and to make sure we work any bugs out and our guys are comfortable with it. And then we launch the customer portal.
Okay, so my advice would be that while all the testing that's going on is fantastic, there should be a short period of time of parallel, so that if someone submits a permit, not only does it go through the regular process of whatever the paper process or whatever the old process is, but also go through the new process of everything being online, I know it's gonna be a pain, but if we only do it for 3 or 4 weeks, we should be okay.
That's our plan.
Perfect, okay. I think that's all the questions I have right now. Kim, you guys, look, I know you didn't start this till December 18th. Even though we approved it earlier, there were other things going on. We know there were other projects that were affecting everybody. So I really appreciate the work that you guys have put into this. Dorothy, nice job on collecting data. One person doing this is fantastic, but knowing that you've worked with Amy and other staff members of Sarah's, that, you know, please extend my thanks to them as well.
And please know, part of the plays into the schedule is their availability for setting up the system.
So that would be my last question. MGO, knowing that they have 3 other jurisdictions that they're getting ready to implement, do they have resources set aside? If we decide to do phase 1 as the in-house piece, they can set aside resources to help us get the in-house piece up and running.
Yes, as a matter of fact, that's what they just committed to us. With the remote access for a week, we have them for a week to discuss issues and things that need to be set up. And that starts March the 23rd, and then they'll be here on site 2 weeks. So they have committed those resources, and we really think we should be able to, you know, move right along.
Have they shared with you what the other jurisdictions are doing as far as their implementation? Are they going all in 100% with?
I have not asked that.
Okay.
You know, I gotta say, our plan always was to go live with building permit, code enforcement, and sewer permits.
Right.
But this has kind of been fast-tracked, really, because we just saw it for the first time in December, and then they were on site in January, and here we are testing, and the code enforcement side just isn't quite set up yet.
Okay, thank you.
So, I'd heard that I was somewhat, I don't know, aggressive or whatever you want to call it, in my comments related to the MGO. I am not. I'm simply uneducated. I only know what I think I want for the county, which is to climb out of this dark ages type of technology that we've been stuck in for years. And I think that we as commissioners have demonstrated our desire to climb out of this by playing around with the conversation. I don't know how many years ago when we were putting $40,000 away yearly to eventually climb into some kind of an online permit. That was years ago. And moved to make it, I don't know, the fully funded. It was going to be $120,000. It was fully funded all the way out. And when that wasn't enough, it was going to cost $1 million. We fully funded it out to $1 million. So there's $1 million allocated towards this. And yet, the MGO was selected in 2017. It's now 2020. I am ignorant of this. I get it. But I don't see it being fast-tracked. My concern to the folks in front of me is that we didn't set you up properly. Probably should have hired a consultant of sorts that their only job was to oversee the project, because every one of you has other jobs to go along with the wishes of someone like myself, who only knows that he just wants to be able to issue a permit by logging on at home and paying for it through a credit card, paying a sewer bill, something along those lines, which is what's already being done in a lot of other jurisdictions. So that's where I am. Dorothy, are you dedicated to this daily? Is that your only role?
Oh, yes.
Right.
This is my number one priority.
But that's different than you still have 2 or 3 other priorities.
Yes, I do.
And that's the concern I have. So moving forward versus the permitting, but the others, there are others, right? We're going to not just address the permitting issue, we're going to address inspections, enforcement, code violations, sewer, others.
Yep.
Planning and zoning. We've already started that information gathering. We've paused it once they came in-house. But the advantage to this is the people who are testing it are involved in the planning and zoning, and they will have much more better input in documenting what they need to do, what they can envision MGO will do for them on just that piece. And I would imagine that whole piece will take much less effort to transfer over to MGO to say, okay, this is what we want it to do. I personally am glad I got involved in this because I'm familiar with the way processes flow within the county and certain departments. Never worked with permitting in I&E before. I have gained a lot of knowledge, but I think what helped tremendously is this isn't a vendor that's a salesman. These are people who are in a jurisdiction who know the business. This is what they do. It would be as if you took our IT department and said, okay, let Sussex County get your programs now. That's exactly what we have. I think Sarah can speak to the validity of what they experienced when MGO came on site.
Absolutely. It's working with, because I've gone through software upgrades in other jurisdictions. And there's always this uphill battle of people who don't really understand what you do. So to work with the folks at MGO who actually do exactly what our guys do is a huge benefit and has made it, I think will make it a lot smoother.
So the concern I have, though, is that we need a dedicated champion, someone who's freed up to specifically work on the implementation, the completion, the full phase, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, however it might be, because of the importance of getting this right, and because of recognizing the folks charged with doing this also have other roles in the county. And so that's a question that I'd like to bring up, or at least have I'm just sprinkling it out there. This is a big project. We need to get it right. We're asking individuals with other roles to have the same sense of urgency that we do while they're filling their plate with other issues regarding the county. We had the money set aside. We didn't go on the cheap, meaning we picked a cheap vendor, but they are cheap, meaning the cost. Comparative is cheap. So we have the money available to do this right. I mean right. There's some serious consideration for that. It's not a discussion we can decide tonight, but I just put it out there for you. What I would suggest, and I remember Commissioner Hosfeld, who sat in the caucus room and said, we need timelines. We had timelines. We did have timelines, correct?
They did give us timelines, but they were unrealistic.
Right. So let's get some realistic timelines. So realistically speaking, 2 months from now, we're going to be in-house online. 2 months. Or you're going to report back to us and explain why.
Well, we can certainly give you an update in 2 months. I mean,
well, you said 2 months is a realistic expectation. Is that?
I personally feel that in order to give a definite, this specific date, it requires our in-house staff to go through the extreme amount of different areas, make sure all these pulled down values are here. You know, we don't have bayous, you know, we have specific values for our building permits, you know. Did we look at trust certs? You know, all the different things.
Charge, how does that happen? What would you do if you were king tomorrow, you went and implemented that strategy? What would you do?
I'm sorry?
If you were in charge, you said it takes staff to go through, what would you do? Dedicate an entire workday to doing that? How would you go about doing that?
That is what's going on right now. Yeah. We have staff in, let's say, 6 departments who are going through their piece of a permit, and as soon as they identify that's something that needs to be fixed, it's communicated, it's documented, communicated to me, and then assembled together and sent to the vendor, and then they have to fix it. There are times when it's feasible to collectively take one specific subject matter, for example, reports. We're going to, here's all the reports we need. Did you go through and check them all? Yep. Okay, these are the modifications we need. Fine tune this and that. That's what we're doing now, and in order for all of those, I think there is 37 different type of permits, all, you know, 10 to 15 to 20 different steps. They're not all cookie cutter. All different people involved, all different types. You may have 15 inspections on one and one on another. You can't move something fast. Some things aren't meant to be rushed. And I personally don't like to have to do things over because it was done wrong the first time. So I think the amount of players that are involved in this is awesome. And we're fortunate that we're doing this in a time period where the influx of work coming into Sarah's area is minimal compared to when grass starts to grow, more complaints, more building permits are coming through. It's an optimal time to be doing the work we're doing.
Is coming, which is why I don't know. I don't sit there with you, but what I want to say real quick is I want to hear with great confidence that you have tomorrow, you have adequate amount of staff that are actively working and dedicated to ironing out the kinks tomorrow, the next day, the next day. If it's when they can get to it, then how can we better serve you? Because that's going to cause the delays.
In terms of our staff, if you're talking about the planning staff.
And that's what we're talking about here.
This is an ideal time of year because the inspector schedules aren't full. We can pull people in. We got our first grass complaint. So it's starting early, and that is a concern. And I actually contacted we have some money in our budget for temporary help. So I contacted the personnel director this afternoon in hopes of pushing that forward. One of the bigger concerns in-house is our front counter. There are only 3 of them. So to pull somebody away to work all day on MGO, I need some help backfilling there.
On deck, we're getting ready to head into the busy time of year. That's going to likely, we end up in that situation and we have not completed, you're literally talking about next winter. Well, if you get into a season of change, like you've mentioned, construction, grass, other, I mean, you really start to slow things down. That would be, in my mind, problematic in a great way, given the fact that we have the financial capability to support the efforts and still meet some benchmarks. That's what I'm looking for. I guess I wanted to understand, are we dedicating work to this activity daily? Can we meet the 2-month, 60 days? If you need 90, let's pick.
And that's a gut feel. We think we can, but it's a gut feel.
But I think it's important that we establish a benchmark. We need to establish something, because otherwise
it's not just all the county workers. It's MGO too, and their resources. But
I understand it. That's why, if you tell me it's June, I can take the medicine. I don't like it when I'm told it's beginning of April and it's not, or beginning of May and it's not, because that's what we've been dealing with here recently. For whatever reason, we have, right? I mean, in fairness, it's going to be done next month. It's going to be done next year. It's what we're dealing with. So we're trying to get away from that. Guys, I'm spending a little extra time on this. I don't care if it's 9 o'clock. I'm sick as a dog. I'm going to stay here. I came here for this reason. We're antiquated. We need to fix this. And I hold every one of us up here accountable. Not them, us, me, right? And if it's out there and people are listening, I'm to blame for this, because there's no excuse that this is going on. So we need to support them, and I need to get to the roots of why. And so I'm saying that we can spend money to assist. We need to set up a timeline. I think 60 days to go in-house, if not report back, 90 days to make it all the way out. Is that unfair?
my guess is that's not unfair.
Okay.
But not certain.
Not certain, but it's not unfair.
That's a real good goal, right? So that's a goal. It's not an open goal. That's, we're trying to get there. Nobody wants you to rush. Nobody wants you to push through and do it wrong. Totally understand it.
We
But
can
at least
also discuss with the county administrator about overtime and things of that nature, too.
if that's what it takes to fully support you, recognizing that I sit here right now at certain odds. I get it. Doesn't mean no good. I understand that. You're gonna leave here tonight and say, who's this guy? I get it. Totally do. I'm not coming at you without a reason for support. So, all right, I'll get off the soapbox. I will say this. I've opened up a door to several things. Potential to hire a consultant to oversee the entire project. I'd like to have a deeper conversation of that. The potential to have dedicated staff, whether it be through hiring or providing assisted services while they stay focused. I think it's a wise use of money.
Definitely.
Would be two things. Mike, I don't need you to weigh in and say yes or no. Is that way out there in Jupiter land?
Well, on the staffing question, I mean, we need to have a discussion about if it's overtime, that's one thing. I'm not sure, some of the positions that you would need to backfill are easily backfilled with temporary or, seasonal or short-term employment. So, that would be a question we'd have to work through. On the consultant question, what I know about the MGO and we're in a licensing agreement with a planning commission, essentially, in Louisiana, that has grown this system. And part of their planning commission has gotten into the whole software deployment business. It's something that when they got into it, they probably never envisioned they would evolve into this. It'd be hard to get a consultant to come in. I don't even know if you could get a consultant to come in and direct them, because this is like a proprietary thing that they have. We have a relationship with it's called the South Central Planning and Development Commission from Terrebonne Parish, Louisiana, which stands for Good Earth, by the way, if you want to know French. I'm not sure that works here. We probably need to, I'm not sure what a consultant could do in this relationship.
Right. Yeah, and to clear, just to clear something up for you, I am actively involved in projects. It is what I do. I'm not being taken away from, I work on multiple things in IT, but when there is software integration or purchasing, I'm involved in that. It was with the sheriff's office, civic rec. That's what I do.
Did you see? Slightly. Had a pretty good presentation today of a very large project. And they had multiple layers of individuals, some just simply assigned to the community relationships of the entire project. And there was support for the individuals who were on the ground running, and the other folks who were in the office, and then there were the administrators. There was a lot of help.
Yeah, we have a lot of help behind us as well. I mean, we've got Kelly
You
doing
don't have help.
public, huh?
You don't necessarily have all the help, maybe.
Oh, well, obviously, yes, we may need some little, but we do have a lot more people than 3, that's all I'm saying. There's a big staff that's helping many different departments.
Yes.
Held us up enough. The consultant thing is not perfect, then maybe we look at temps. Maybe not overtime, but temps, somebody can backfill a position, something along those lines. I guess what I would charge you with doing would be not to decide that tonight, but to ask you to what would that look like? What would that look like to ensure that we could meet a 2-month deadline? What would you need to meet a 2-month deadline that the levy court can do that could help you get there? And you don't have to decide that tonight, but maybe if you could present that to Mike or myself within the next couple days, that might get us out of here before 10 o'clock tonight. Yeah. All right, Commissioner Sweeney.
Thanks, sir. So would you say we're 80%, 85% through this project?
Let's see, what do you think, 80? 75, 80?
I want to say we're between 75 and 80% configured. Amy just sent me 42 questions yesterday of things that need to be looked at. I have 3 or 4 major things to be addressed.
I've seen your notes. So 42 questions seems pretty small compared to the number of questions that you've answered in the past. So,
Yes, and so once those are done, then we can do a true parallel where the system is configured. When you enter in a permit, it should work exactly as we have anticipated, and you should be able to compare it to the current system and get the same calculated fees, output documents as you do in both systems. But to get to that point, to do a true parallel where there's no changes, we're 75 to 80%.
okay, so 80% through is not the time to bring in an outside consultant that you have to train and bring up to speed on everything that we've done. They have all those hundreds of questions that you've already asked Amy to provide, so probably not. But I do like the idea of the county administrator working with, not only with IT, to make sure that there's no new projects that start, whether it's the open government project or New World replacement or any of that, that's going to take what is our one project lead away from the ability to focus on this project going forward. But also to help Sarah's group out with staff augmentation to take care of the minor tasks that start to come up this time of year, so that those who are experienced can stay with the project until it gets through completion. Is that okay, Mr. Petty-Demange? Okay. And then the final piece, and if, Ms. Durham, if you're that close to choosing a vendor, that to me is paramount to have that done and ready to go with the online portion as that phase starts to.
I mean, there is an implementation phase for that too.
Sure, absolutely, yep. That's why it was important to have that characteristic of you've worked with the MGO in the past, so.
Yes, most definitely.
Thanks, Commissioner Buxton.
So what I would like to add on, using George and Lynch and the sewer project, is that there were times when they had all hands on deck and they had to go outside the pay scale. They had to pay overtime. This project clearly is under budget. It may not be quite on time based on my timeline, not yours. I get it. But it is under budget since we put $1 million away and we're not going to have to technically utilize the $1 million. So I would suggest it would be a worthy ask to support the staff by offering some identifiable overtime to go all hands to meet a 60-day rollout in a 90-day. I think that's a fair and wise use of money. Now, we could decide on capping it. I don't know what that would mean. If up to, I don't know how many grand, whatever it might be, but I think that would be a fair, ask to satisfy our needs and recognize the staff and what they're dealing with right now.
So we've identified a number of things that have to happen over the next 60 to 90 days. Back in May of 19, or March of 19, we were provided a project plan from Ryan Hutchison. Could we look at that again to see where we are in the plan that he set aside last March, update it so we know what of those 10 steps are done, what of those 10 steps are left to be done, and nobody's going to hold you accountable for any dates that you put on it, but just some idea of what is left to do and assign dates. Just wag it on the dates that you think that it's possible to get. It's got county provide to MGO for CE, which is code enforcement. MGO schedule a demo of code enforcement. Public Works test sewer permits. That was number 4, which we haven't gotten there yet, to that point yet. So we just look at, plan over and update it.
We have.
We've tested.
Yeah, and we're to the point where what we've requested isn't good enough. We want automation between building permits, which is something we don't have today.
Right.
And sewer permits.
Okay.
So that's a major piece that I'm going to be making a request and figuring out how to make that happen.
But it's not going to hold us up.
No,
that
it's not
wouldn't be
going to
one
hold us
thing
up.
to
I
hold
get
us
that.
up.
So
What we have, it's already created.
just look through this plan, and you don't need to come back and present the plan to us, but you could share it with the 7 commissioners, Mr. Pettit-Demange, so we know, this is just WAG dates that are potential for the rest of the project. So we
Okay.
know when to start thinking about New World, Susan. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner comments? So I would just want to clarify, how do you, to the four of you in front of us, along with Administrator Petitmage, look at the idea of overtime hours that allow for us to dedicate certain employees that are willing to or think can to help shepherd this thing through? So put something together. Would that then come back to us for consideration? How would that look?
I'm not sure it would necessarily need to come back. We may need to move do some budget adjustment to put the money into the proper budgets to pay overtime. One question I have when we're talking about overtime is, are we limited by the availability of MGO, like Monday through Friday, for example? Or suppose we had people come in on Saturday and work like a whole day, no interruptions. Is that worth it, or do you need MGO on the other side?
No, we
have
don't.
been doing that at certain times.
Well, MGO has been working on weekends. You're asking about staff at county staff working on weekends?
Yeah, for example,
It is worth it. I mean, if that's the decision.
if we get busy and we can't pull them off the counter or off their jobs, but we could do it on Saturday because we don't have phones ringing and people walking in. I wouldn't want to burn people out, but if that's one way to get that training done or get screens, finished or something like that, is it possible on the weekend?
I think so. I think so, yes.
So that's a good ask. It's something you guys can work through. We don't have to solve that tonight, but I really think we're commissioners, right? I think it's a wise use of funds that are set aside. So I don't think there's anything left really to discuss. We've had enough conversation on this. There's nothing to move forward on. Correct, guys? Ladies, appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any, I assume, right, any public comments? Any public comments? Seeing none, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. We have no old business. I will turn the gavel over to the Vice President so I can take care of the next two items. You probably don't even need a gavel.
Commissioner Banta?
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Introduce a resolution, or like a motion to approve Resolution 3772, a resolution calling upon a public hearing on a proposal to extend Kent County Sewage Disposal District Number 1, Burtonwood Village Area, Big Wood LLC property.
Second motion.
Thank you. Motion by Commissioner Banta, second by Commissioner Sweeney. Any questions on the motion? Seeing none, Mr. Tanaka?
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Vice President, roll call reveals 7 yeas.
Thank you. 7 yeas. Resolution 3772 has passed. Item number 2, Commissioner Banta.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Introduction of Resolution 3773, KCSDD number 1, proposed sewer extension, Burtonwood Village Area, Big Wood LLC property, for public hearing on March 10, 2020 at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Commissioner Banta. I turn the gavel back over to you, President Banta.
Thank you, sir. Next item, Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Quayle?
Thank you, Commissioner Angel, Commissioners. Before I move into a brief explanation of this matter. I do want to take a moment to recognize the tremendous effort of our former county attorney, Bill Pepper, in not only negotiating this contract, but all contracts since he was first appointed. He was a great negotiator, did an excellent job at the bargaining table, kept everybody on their toes, and we certainly appreciate it. And Craig came in after you appointed him and took up the reins, did a great job bringing it to a close, and we were successful in getting it finally to the point where we are today so that we can recommend the Levy Court that you approve this 3-year contract. I think in the audience we also have a couple of representatives from the unions team. We have the Executive Vice President Mike Hudson from CWA 13101, along with our shop steward Jesse Wallace and one of the bargaining team members, Ray Jansen. So we do recommend approval of the contract. I briefed you about some of the changes. It is only a 3-year contract, so you will see this before you perhaps in your terms or your next terms. So if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Questions? Thank you, Mr. Quayla. Then I move to approve the successor collective bargaining agreement with CWA Local 13101, representing eligible Kent County Sewer Fund employees as recommended, and authorize the president and county attorney to execute the document on behalf of Levy Court.
Second motion.
Regular moved and seconded. Mr. Angel, Mr. Pepper, in regard to the bargaining agreement with CWA Local Union 13101. Are there any questions on that motion? Seeing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton? Absent? Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the motion as presented.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you. Mr. Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have 3 motions to make. First one is I move to authorize the Department of Public Works to offer Rakesh and Krupa R. Patel the appraised value in the amount of $1,070 for granting a permanent sewer easement through parcel 7-000-11104-03-0910 with funding through the USDA loan grant funds, and move to authorize the President of Levy Court to sign the easement agreements upon acceptance by the property owners.
Second.
Ready to move to the second, Mr. Howe, and did you do that? And Mr. Hall, I thought you did that. And Mr. Hall to approve the motion is now made by Mr. Howe. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton? Absent. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the motion as presented. Next item, Mr. Hall. Mr. Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to approve to increase contract value for the London Village Sewer Engineering Services Agreement designed to KCI Technologies Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $100,000. Move to increase the contract value for the Paris Villa Sewer Engineering Services Agreement to KCI Technologies Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $100,000. Move to authorize the President of Levy Court to sign the agreements provided by KCI Technologies Incorporated for the cited projects, and move to authorize the Department of Public Works to pursue DNREC and/or USDA funding application approvals and commitment for loans and grants related to the project for additional funding, and authorize the Public Works Director to sign the application documents.
Second.
Regular move to the second, Mr. Howell and Mr. Sweeney to approve Parisville London Village. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton, absent. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the motion as so presented. Mr. Howe.
Thank you, Mr. President. Third and final motion, I move to extend the ferric chloride chemical contract with Camira Water Solutions from April 1, 2020 until March 31, 2021 at a unit price of $573 per dry ton, and authorize the President of Levy Court to execute change order number 1 with funding from the FY 2020 and FY 2021 sewer fund operating budgets, and authorize the President of Levy Court to execute the contract.
Second.
Regularly moved and seconded, Mr. Howell. Mr. Hall, to approve the motion is made by Mr. Howell. Howell, any questions on that motion? Hearing none. Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton, absent. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the motion as so presented. Mr. Angel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Any further questions on this item? I move to approve the proposed amendment P20-01 to Kent County Levy Court Policy 2.15 as presented.
Second.
Regularly moved and seconded by Mr. Angel and Mr. Pepper to approve proposed amendment P20-01. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton, absent. Mr. Hall?
No.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 5 yeas, 1 nay, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 5 affirmative votes approves proposed amendment P20-01. Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to award a community event promotional grant in the amount of $750 to the town of Hartley, Delaware, to assist with the cost of promotional materials purchased to advertise and market the Memorial Day Parade that will be held on Saturday, May 23rd, 2020.
Second motion.
Really moved and seconded, Mr. Hall, Mr. Pepper for the town of Hartley. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton, absent. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. 6 affirmative votes approves the motion for the town of Hartley. Mr. Vice President, number 2 under other business, sir.
Yes, sir. I move to go into executive session immediately following committee meetings of March 3rd, 2020 for preliminary discussion on site acquisition for a publicly funded capital improvement legal strategy session regarding collective bargaining or pending or potential litigation and personnel matters pursuant to 29 Delaware Code 10,004 B2, 4, and 9.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Pepper, seconded by Mr. Sweeney to go into executive session on March 3rd, 2020. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none, Ms. Tanaka, please call the roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton, absent. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Yes.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
Thank you, Lori. That'll move us to executive session on March 3rd, 2020. Informational items. Mr. Petamaj.
Thank you, Mr. President. Real briefly, I just want to remind the commissioners that this Thursday evening here at the county building, we'll be meeting with the Cooperative Extension Service for University of Delaware and Delaware State University, as we do every year at this time. The event begins at 6 p.m. It'll be in room 220, and we hope that all the commissioners can join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petamaj. Mr. Pepper.
Yes, Mr. President, just like to remind the commissioners tomorrow morning at the Harrington Moose Lodge, the Tax Ditch Managers Annual Breakfast will take place starting at 8 o'clock.
Thank you, Mr. Pepper. Any other informational items? Any public comments? Any public comments? Seeing none, any commissioner comments? Mr. Angel.
Just a real quick one, sir. On March 3rd, I won't be here. I'll be representing us in Washington, D.C. from the 28th to the 4th.
Got it. Thank you, sir. Any other commissioner comments? If not, I entertain a motion to adjourn, from which we will go to a workshop, from which we will not be returning.
So move.
Second.
Ready moved and seconded that we will adjourn this meeting, go into a workshop from which we will not be returning. Any questions on that motion? Hearing none. Ms. Tanaka, please call a roll.
Mr. Angel?
Yes.
Mr. Buxton, absent. Mr. Hall?
Yes.
Mr. Howell?
Yes.
Mr. Pepper?
Yes.
Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Mr. Banta?
Absolutely.
Mr. President, roll call reveals 6 yeas, 1 absent.
6 affirmative votes. We are adjourned to workshop.